First and Last. First and Last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
I'm walking on sunshine. Whoa, I'm walking on sunshine. Whoa, I'm walking on sunshine. Whoa, and it's time to feel good. Hey.
It's First and Last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Callers join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And you can tweet the show on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at MGolic Jr. 57. Man, Landon Donovan really stepped in it, huh? Like, you don't have to fight me on making money when you've got the chance to, especially via Twitter. But, man, Landon Donovan really seemed to step in it. Like, every day when I leave Golic and Wingo, I get to sit in the car and I listen to the guys on the way home. I make sure they haven't screwed up built during the first 2 hours. And I'm listening on the way home, and when I leave Taylor Twellman, the chair in that room, the third chair in that room yesterday, because we're all engrossed in the World Cup talk right now, specifically for us over in that room, we're selfishly asking all our soccer people about our specific teams we drafted in the snake draft over there. We're like everyone else right now. We're trying to figure out who to root for. Hell, we're like Landon Donovan right now, trying to figure out who to root for, because we don't have America in it right now. And so it puts us in kind of a weird spot. And so yesterday I leave the studio, and I see Taylor Twellman going and sit down in my seat. And the seat gets instantly, there's a lot less mass in the seat, but there is a hell of a lot of handsome in there. Man, Taylor Twellman, it's a good-looking guy. Great suit. But he sits down there, and I'm like, all right, Taylor's going to come in here. Dad and Trey are going to basically treat him like we treat fantasy football people and just ask them self-serving questions about our team. But no. Taylor comes in ready. First, I listen to him eviscerate Phil Mickelson, which, Taylor, well done. Magnificent. And I knew, all right, something was going to be different with this. Something was going to have a little bit extra. And then we got to the subject of Landon Donovan. And if anyone missed this somehow over the course of the day, Landon Donovan sent out a tweet that was part of an advertisement with Wells Fargo Bank, basically saying that while he wasn't, while America's not in the World Cup, that my other, he held up a scarf in an image in the tweet that said, my other team is Mexico, said Vamos Mexico, basically said that because the U.S. wasn't in the World Cup, he was throwing his support behind Mexico, who we know for the U.S. going forward, that 2026 Olympic bid or World Cup bid is tied to Mexico and Canada. But we also know this is one of the U.S.'s and USA Soccer's biggest rivals, if not their absolute biggest rival. And apparently, Landon Donovan's teammates were none too happy. Now, former U.S. players, including Carlos Bocanegra, Kobe Jones, and Herculez Gomez, criticized him. But Taylor seemed to have a little bit extra yesterday. And this is what he had to say on Golic and Wingo when he was asked about Landon Donovan choosing to root for Mexico.
It's healthy to be rivals. It's no problem with it. Everyone has their own price tag, apparently.
Whoa.
But I'm going to finish it with this. Because a former teammate of ours, Carlos Bocanegra, tweeted Landon Donovan. Landon went from 0 to 100 about building bridges, not barriers, about Mexican Americans and whatnot. And yet this is the same guy that questioned German Americans and whether or not they were passionate enough to wear the red, white, and blue. I'm confused. All I'm saying is I'm not going to root for Mexico. That's the same team that tried to literally kick our rear ends in World Cup qualifying. That's the same team that the players tried to break my leg playing. Why do I have to root for him? It's healthy.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Yeet! Like that is that once you heard the broken leg line, you realize how deep this stuff goes. And I heard Taylor throw this line out to my dad, and it's an apt one. It's like it would be like asking one of us, myself or my dad, to go and cheer for Michigan in the national championship because we didn't make it. There's no way on God's green earth it's happening. And everyone sitting around here has that level of rival. That would be like asking Allie, our resident New York Giants fan, to root for the Patriots, even though they've gotten over on them twice in the past, so the Giants have a nice upper hand in this. Allie, I can't imagine you've gone into any of the recent Super Bowls looking up at the Patriots and going, you know what? I understand we're not in it this year. It's been a down season, but going to root for these guys just because of our storied past and proximity.
Well, I'm definitely not rooting for the Eagles.
Yeah, no, you weren't.
That's a lot worse.
You weren't in a great spot there. This was a rock and a hard place Super Bowl
You
for
know
you.
what? I just focus on the betting.
There you go. How could you say gambling, bailing everyone out? Shout out to Congress or the Supreme Court, whoever bailed us out. The Supreme Court, yeah. Shout out to the Supreme Court. First and last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And there's a lot of layers to this. Now, Landon Donovan has since come out and sort of apologized, especially for his response to Carlos Bocanegra. Basically said, to begin, my heart bleeds red, white, and blue. No one should ever question my allegiance and support to U.S. soccer and the national teams. That being said, having grown up east of Los Angeles, playing with Mexican teammates whose passion for football inspired me at a very young age, as well as recently with Club Leon and Liga MX, I always had a strong connection and respect for our neighbor. Since the men's national team was not participating, I am supportive of our CONCACAF rivals and would like to see them do well. If others disagree, that's their prerogative. But similar to how U.S. Soccer Federation, the Canadian Soccer Federation, and Federación Mexicana Football joined together in the united bid to bring the 2026 World Cup, I believe in supporting each other by building bridges, not barriers. This is where he lost our friend Will Kane. Now, a lot of people would see that as maybe a bit of a political undertone in this from Landon. Landon Donovan is guilty, by the way, here of nothing else other than doing too much. Because like he said, if he wants to come out and throw support behind Mexico, especially if this is something he's taking home a little bit of cash for, like Taylor said, everyone's got their price. I just hope for his sake it was high. Because we all look at this. Anyone who's got the chance to make money in advertising dollars looks at a situation and says, can I support this? Is it have any sort of moral qualm for me? Does it go against things that I stand for? And if this for Landon Donovan, because of any of these reasons that he's purported, is enough of a price tag for him, hey, listen, I'm not going to stand away in the way of someone making a buck. Your former teammates are going to be mad at you. You can have those conversations behind closed doors. But the minute it bleeds out into the streets like this and all of a sudden you feel the need to respond, because that's the danger. That's the danger in this, especially on Twitter, is, man, you sit down there and look, and you get a couple of responses, and you feel a little bit too bold, all of a sudden you start getting yourself in trouble. It's what we get ourselves in trouble with every day when you look at trolls in your mentions, especially when that tweet's got that hashtag ad at the end. Like, you are guaranteed to get roasted, so you better be ready and just sit on that bet of money when it comes, or else you're going to find yourself in a spot like this, where you say too much, you respond emotionally, and all of a sudden, you're looking out in a lot of mad former teammates and guys who now, because of their position like Taylor's in the media, are going to address this publicly. Then, of course, you're also going to have to deal with just the rest of us talking heads, like our friend Will Kane from the Will Kane Show, who definitely had some interesting feelings coming off these comments from Landon Donovan.
Landon Donovan responded to Carlos Bocanegra wondering why you would encourage people to cheer for your biggest rival by wrapping his advertisement, his Wells Fargo advertisement, wrapping it in a humanitarian cause, and then calling into question whether or not Carlos Bocanegra had forgotten his own heritage. He basically said that a Mexican American wasn't Mexican enough for not rooting for Mexico. Landon Donovan tried to shield his sellout ad with humanitarian causes, politics, and calling other people not woke enough. What in the world? This is the point at which you're so woke, you're a joke. That's what Landon Donovan became here. An absolute joke.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive's Home Insurance. Getting a quote is easier than ever, and the irony of Will Kane saying that as he rattles off a rhyme that is fully Dare Ad approved is hilarious. I can only hope that his producer, Steve Cerruti, was absolutely berating him on the other side of that soundbite for what was a god-awful rhyme scheme in that moment in time. But I think the point that's served from that argument is he tried to justify his selling out. If you're going to go and collect, that's fine. But you got to be ready to absorb a little bit of blowback and just quietly sit there and count money. Because if not, Taylor Twellman is going to come and publicly flame you. That is what we have learned, if nothing else. Do not mess with the human flamethrower that is Taylor Twellman. Not when he's in the hot seat over there. Not when it's the hot take third seat over on Golic and Wingo. Y'all better recognize what Taylor Twellman's bringing to the table. 888-729-3776. I'm interested in how many people outside of this immediate bubble are going to have a problem with this. As general fans of the United States, as people that we're all bumming a little bit right now that we don't get to be out here on our national pride. To seeing Landon Donovan do this rub everyone else the wrong way. I can understand Taylor. Once you heard that broken leg comment, this is deeply personal because of a deeply personal experience for Taylor, because he had to go up against these guys. I had to go up against Michigan. For the rest of us that don't live and die with this as closely as others, is this something that bothers you? 888 say ESPN. But coming up next, you didn't pay the man his money. Now he's out. Good luck with that. First and last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
And that's it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Vegas.
You know, it's just dream come true. You know, that's why you have to play something special.
Everybody says what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but we brought the cup home.
Yeah! It's not a desert mirage. It's Lord Stanley, and he is coming to Washington.
One more time for good measure. How you feeling today, Ovi?
Yeah!
I wonder what day, like how far into this we're going to get before Ovi starts his day looking through bloodshot eyes. Like, you got to ride this out as long as humanly possible. For how long that guy had to wait for that cup in particular, you got to ride that one out as long as possible. It's first and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And we were asking before, Landon Donovan choosing to openly root because of an advertisement for Mexico, how people really felt about this. Was it as much of a betrayal as our own Taylor Twellman, former U.S. men's national team member, and some other former national team member teammates claimed it to be, basically insinuating that he's a sellout? And I wonder how much the average U.S. soccer fan actually cared about that, because it's really how much stock do you put in the rivalry? Equated it to my rivalry with Michigan as a Notre Dame fan. Talked about Allie, our producer's rivalry, as a New York Giants fan, watching this Patriots-Eagles Super Bowl. What you look for in this. And Scott Foster tweeted in the Shell Pen, or the, God, I am really struggling with this 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed business as of late. Scott Foster tweeted in on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at Golic Jr. 57. As a Canadian, I only cheer for the U.S. when they play Russians, and as a diehard Michigan fan, I only cheer for the Irish when they play the Buckeyes. Basically reminding us that there's always someone you hate more until it's the team that you hate the most. We found the team that Taylor Twellman hates the most because of personal experience, because that rivalry mattered so much to him. I wonder, for us as Americans who are much more inclined to maybe treat Mexico and Canada as not worth our time when it comes to rivalries on this stage, even if it goes contrary to what's actually the truth. By accounts of the guys playing on the team, Mexico is our biggest rival. I wonder if the rest of us treat it that way. 888-729-3776, 888-SAY-ESPN. Pat the Dapper tweets, and I realize USA-Mexico is a rivalry, but it's less Yankees-Red Sox and more like Lakers-Clippers. Where was the venom and disgust when these former players were on the pitch not making the deep run? The rage is misplaced. Get your money, Landon. Dollar bills, y'all. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people that say, you know what, man? We're out here trying to get paid. It was a very transparent payday, too. And you can hate on how corny it was, maybe, but still getting paid. Anyway, right now it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Because, again, we played it coming in.
Yeah!
In case you had forgotten, it was the Caps year. The Caps, your Stanley Cup champions. Now without a coach. Like, this is a weird setting to find yourself in if you're the Capitals, but Washington Capitals, now former head coach Barry Trotz, has tendered his resignation from the team, become a free agent after leading this franchise to its first Stanley Cup on June 7. He said, after careful consideration and consultation with my family, I'm officially announcing my resignation as head coach of the Washington Capitals. Like, this is a big deal. I was trying to think of other instances in sports where you have championship coaches walking away from their team. Just recently, before the World Cup, we had this happen with Zinedine Zidane and Real Madrid, which prompted some things with the Spanish national team and their head coach. And if you buy into the Le Batard style of handing out championships and their own claims, Scott Frost just left the national champion UCF Golden Knights. But other than those two examples, which are a little more off the beaten path and not a part of the North American four major professional sports, outside of the NHL, who has now, in the last 40 years, 5 instances of coaches who won the Stanley Cup and then didn't return the next season, this seems abnormal. This seems like a strange occurrence, and given the particulars of this situation, though, actually makes a fair amount of sense. And Greg Wyshynski, one of our ESPN reporters, talked about why this came to be the way it did.
Well, we all knew that Barry Trotz didn't have a contract for next season. What we didn't know is that his current contract had a clause that if the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, there was a 2-year extension that kicked in. Problem being is he signed that contract back in 2014. That's before Mike Babcock made a bunch of money with the Leafs, before Joel Quenneville made a bunch of money with the Blackhawks. It only paid him $300,000 more than his current salary. So Trotz sat down with GM Brian McClellan to get a new deal. He wanted about 5 years, said McClellan just before, and the Capitals didn't want to meet that price. So Barry Trotz resigns after bringing a cup to Washington.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. This, to me, you can make this about two things. You can make it about what the value of Barry Trotz is to you, which clearly wasn't enough despite the fact that in the last 4 years since he got to Washington, they've got the best record in the NHL over that time span. They've got 2 President's Cup trophies and now a Stanley Cup trophy to lord over the top of it. But, man, it shows you just how much that one Stanley Cup was worth to these guys. Because you heard Barry Trotz at the parade and them talking about defending their cup and trying to make this happen rather tepidly because he understood the reality of his contract situation. But this shows you how much that one cup was worth to Washington, how much that one sigh of relief is worth, because you're willing to compromise this part of your team that was this consistent over the last 4 years by basically saying, you know what, the discomfort over the potential length of this deal, we're going to pass. We're going to pass on that. Now, first and last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app, the nation's capital. Some interesting times for them in their own right. In another sport entirely right now. Coming up next, we got to do a little bit of time traveling. I'm shocked by this, and I know former friend of the show over at Golic and Wingo, Ronda Rousey, going to be extremely jealous of what one Washington National was able to pull off. But this is an interesting DC sports right now. The Nats, I think they've lost 7 of their last 9. Bryce Harper's shaving his beard. All is not well right now as Barry Trotz decides he's going to go out on top and ride off into the sunset. What do we make of that? Can you remember another time when a championship-winning head coach, we mentioned a couple of them that might loosely qualify, but really another championship head coach being jettisoned like this because of a decision that's basically coming from the organization itself? Straight Talk Wireless nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. We mentioned time traveling in our nation's capital, but coming up next, as we continue our streak, we've got those workplace streak right now, days mentioning LeBron, and we get to add a number. Is there a growing belief that LeBron might actually stay home? It's first and last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
What do you think LeBron will do this summer, and what do you think he should do?
I hope he stays.
I mean, I have no idea at this point. Sitting down and considering everything, you know, my family is a huge part of whatever I've decided to do.
This is First and Last. Now, First and Last. First and Last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
Ooh, baby, let's stay together, loving you well.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Got some tweets coming in, the 100flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at mGolicJr57. I love coming in here, having you guys do my job for me. It is very nice, and we have got an absolute gem right here. Adam Granger Big Nadam on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed tweets in. We're talking this morning about Landon Donovan yesterday getting called a sellout by Taylor Twellman and some of his former teammates for supporting Mexico in the World Cup in the name of a Wells Fargo ad on Twitter. We said, everyone's got their price. Landon Donovan is guilty of trying to justify a payday and going to great lengths to explain something that's very simple. He took the money. He took the money and he tried to justify it with a bunch of other points that ultimately got him in trouble and had him going out on Twitter and issuing apologies. Guilty of doing too much. But it brought up an interesting point, is how much is worth it? Taylor Twellman said every man has his price. And Adam Granger asked, the question really is, how much money would it take for you to root for your rival? Because that's just it, is when you have to put a bet on it, when you have to put a dollar amount on it, and all of a sudden ante up in the exact same way for to be out in public on your timeline, whether it's your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, somewhere where people are going to have to see it, the people that you care about, the people that are going to judge you. What's the dollar amount it's worth for you to be draped in the equivalent of the Mexican flag for Landon Donovan? For me, wearing maize and blue for the Michigan Wolverines. For Allie having to show up, a New York Giants fan, our producer Allie, and be wearing Philadelphia Eagles colors. What's the dollar amount that makes it worth it to you? At ESPN Radio, at Golic Jr. 57, or 888-729-3776 on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Surprise a friend or a loved one today with a bouquet from 1-800-Flowers.com. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. We also promised you some time traveling, by the way. And when we talk about time travel, we're obligated to do this.
It's Golic and Wingo.
So there is a possibility that you could go back in time?
There's a possibility that I could go back in time? That's your question to me?
Go back in time and fight. Go back in the octagon.
I do not have the ability to go back in time, no.
That is Ronda Rousey being contentious and combative with my father in an interview because she couldn't understand the phrasing of a question. And even after he tried to correct it, was still combative enough to make some snarky comment about time travel that has now cemented her legacy on sports talk radio. So good job cementing your legacy in a way that also doesn't break your face. It's very nice. But we have to bring that up because Juan Soto actually accomplished what Ronda Rousey could not. Juan Soto, the Washington Nationals rookie, who has made some headlines already by being a great player during his short stint in the majors thus far, actually pulled off something that a few others have only pulled off in Major League history. He hit a home run in the past. Basically, Juan Soto was a part of a game that was a continuation from a game before his original call-up, hits a home run in that game, his first Major League home run, or so we thought. And for more of an explanation on that, our very own Tim Kirkchin came out and helped us out.
Okay, let me try to explain. Okay, there's a question whether Soto's home run was the first career homer or the sixth career homer. Fortunately, the Elias got involved and said, even though this will go down as his first homer, because this game will go down in the records as having been played on May the 15th, but it's really his sixth homer, and that's how Elias will look at it, because it was hit on May the 18th. The fact that he was in the minor leagues at AA 2 weeks before the May 15 game started is really confusing, but I've seen this happen before. It happened with Dave Parker once, it happened with Barry Bonds once, and if it ever happens that one guy plays in the same game for two teams involved in the game, then that will be it. I will retire because it's possible a pitcher can get a win and a loss in the same game. And when that happens, I will have to leave because nothing could get better than that.
Wow, Tim Kirkchin announcing his retirement on national TV. Amazing stuff from Timmy. It's First and Last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So there you go. Time travel in our nation's capital. Ronda Rousey somewhere just scratching her head, befuddled right now as how this is possible and why she can't do this as well. Some other people scratching their heads have to be Cleveland sports fans at this point because, my God, you have been through the ringer already merely a week and a half, 2 weeks into the offseason right now. You've had every possible rumor, scenario thrown your way already, and as we continue to chew them up and spit them out and try and find our way back to some sort of base camp in all this, We've now come back to maybe the original and easiest solution in all of this. Maybe LeBron just wants to stay home. Brian Windhorst, our ESPN NBA insider.
He wants to stay in Cleveland. He's looking for a reason to stay in Cleveland. But the trouble is, when we get to July 6th or July 8th, when he's about to make that decision, what will have the Boston Celtics done by then? What will have the 76ers done by then? What will have the Lakers have done by then? And how will that compare to the Cavs and what they're able to do? After 4 years at the top, they're going to have a lot fewer options than those other teams, and that's the real issue LeBron is looking at.
And that's the issue we've pointed out all along, is there's just not a lot of room to do much in Cleveland right now. There's not a lot of room for movement. That's the biggest appeal, as I've debated the appeal long before Kawhi Leonard came on the table, of what Los Angeles and teams of that ilk have to offer LeBron, and it's just mobility. It's options. It's things that he doesn't have in Cleveland right now. Anything Cleveland's going to have to do is going to have to come at a heavy price tag. You're going to basically have to cut off your arm and hand it to somebody else just to get one back, and it's just going to be in favor of a different arm. You're not going to a place where you can build a whole new body. The thing in Los Angeles right now, I saw a note from 538 yesterday. It would be the first super team built from scratch. Every other big three or combination thereof has come together somewhat organically, with at least one of the parts already in tow, even for LeBron James. Coming back to Cleveland the second time, Kyrie Irving already at home. Going to Miami, Dwayne Wade already at home. We know the Warriors much more of a homegrown team, and on down the list, the Boston Celtics, the original Boston Three Party. All of these different places had at least one, so building this from scratch would be something new in its own right. But what he's got in Cleveland right now is a difficult prospect. And conversely, for the Cavaliers, they're in a rough spot right now. They're in a rough spot trying to figure this out. Brian Windhorst mentioning draft night's coming up, and it's not an easy time for the Cavaliers organization.
They have to decide between team building, refreshing this roster, getting some youth, growing some young players, and they've got to decide between LeBron building, which would maybe be to trade the 8th pick, maybe see what the market is for Kevin Love, to get older players who may not be able to help you in 2 or 3 years. You know how this is so difficult? They put themselves here. Yeah. Because when they decided last summer to trade Kyrie Irving for a draft pick, it became apparent that this was ultimately going to lead to this type of decision. And so they're also in the dark. LeBron is not going to talk to them and tell them what he prefers. They're going to have to operate independently of LeBron. This is going to be a very interesting draft night for the Cavs and their future.
First and last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app, Mike Golic Jr. here with you. And operating independently of LeBron was exactly what that Kyrie Irving trade was. That was operating and making a move that was not in the best interest of LeBron James, the player, and his future in Cleveland. Trying to put the best team around him. And with LeBron James, there will never be an obligation to this team ever again after that first time around. There will never be an obligation to the Cavaliers organization after that first time around because of Dan Gilbert. There is nothing in LeBron James' heart at this point in time, no matter what the outcome of this situation is, whether he ultimately ends up back in Cleveland or whether he more than likely chooses to leave for greener pastures. There is no version of this where LeBron James says, I am going to make this decision on a timeline that is friendly or thoughtful in favor of this team. And I can't blame him for that. Why are you going to help the guy that went out of his way to slight you and kick you out of the door the last time that you decided to leave town? Why are you going to go out of your way to help that guy that's never really had your back throughout this process? Why would you go out of your way to help that guy? Might it be unfair to the city? Yes, but LeBron James' legacy in Cleveland is secure at this point. LeBron James will not have to worry about the way he is thought of in Cleveland, Ohio at this point, even if it ends up costing them, because I have a feeling if everyone's honest with themselves, they kind of recognize what happens in Cleveland the minute LeBron James leaves town. You enjoy those good times, you remember and hold on to them, because it's going to be a long time before they're around again. 888-729-3776. Hit us up, the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. But coming up next, we got a new friend here. First and last. We rarely get a lot of friends that want to wake up early and hang out with us in the morning. So coming up next, we're going to try and make our new friend feel at home. We're going to ask him what the Yankees need at the trade deadline. And my God, this just feels cruel. What Knicks fans have to look forward to and hope for on draft night. That's next. It's First and Last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
I'm back in the New York groove. I'm back in the New York groove.
First and Last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. You can tweet the show, the 100flowers.com Twitter feed. We asked you all morning, what's it going to take? What's the dollar amount that gets you to root for your rival? Landon Donovan out here rooting for Mexico because Wells Fargo is breaking him off. A lot of his former teammates had some problems with it. We asked you. Robbie Flanagan tweets into the 100flowers.com Twitter feed. The only way this New Jersey Devils fan would root for the New York Rangers is if my son played for them. That's a good out. That's a good spot right there. I think that for most people would be an easy concession. Maybe it wouldn't be. I don't know. That was kind of how we always treated it. Never had to make that choice, though. Appreciate the scholarship, Coach Weiss. And Kip Jones tweets in, diehard Michigan State fan, and I would never root for Michigan or take any money to be a Michigan fan. Book it. We welcome in now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, Gordon Damer from ESPN New York. You're going to hear him at the top of the hour in New York. And Gordon, we'll ask you that to start right off right now. As someone in New York and as I'm sure a diehard fan of sport, what would it take for you? Is there a dollar amount that could get you to root for a rival?
Well, I think the kid angle, if your son or your daughter is performing in a sport, I think that that's an interesting take. My only thing would be, to a certain extent, like at some point, maybe my son or daughter shouldn't get drafted by my most hated rival. Like, be a little bit better. Get drafted a little higher up if you really want me to, get on board fully.
Yeah, that is true. Be in a position where you've got some agency, where you can pull an Eli Manning if you need to, and the team you don't want is going to draft you.
Dad told you to practice more, so it's kind of at some point on you.
Yeah, you do have to listen to Dad. See, my dad always made that claim, by the way, that he would root for us no matter where, and that would always supersede his love for any of the teams that he root for. But he never had to actually put his money where his mouth is. It's easy for him to say that after the fact. I feel like I should point that out.
Yeah.
But that's great. So, all right, speaking of fandom right now, we've got you on here. A lot happening, as it always tends to be in New York. We had the Yankees last night hold on against the Nationals. And I guess for the Yankees right now, it's a pretty clear identity that this team has got and a pretty clear understanding of need going into the trade deadline. But I wonder just how dire is this need for added arms in this bullpen, in this pitching rotation going to the deadline?
Well, it's funny. The word need, I have fun with that on our show. People nowadays, my wife always says, I need to go to Target. Well, you don't need, you'd want to. The Yankees don't need to do anything because while they do have a very clear need for maybe a starting pitcher, you would think, they've gone now 8-3 in their last 11 with the offense scoring about 3 runs per game. And even with, you take a look at the starters outside of Luis Severino, who's been outstanding, is going to be in the conversation again for Cy Young. Masahiro Tanaka, not great before he went on the DL. Sonny Gray has largely been terrible all year. They've lost Jordan Montgomery, hasn't missed a beat. You take a look at the starters that they have. CC Sabathia went a month without winning a game, and it wasn't just simply a thing where he didn't win. The ERA was about 5. The Yankees just keep rolling along, largely because of their offense, largely because of their bullpen. So while Brian Cashman, I think it's not like he's sitting around saying, I don't have anything to do. I don't know necessarily that they need to do anything anytime soon. Before the trade deadline comes, yes, they'd like to add a high-end starter who could clearly start a playoff game and you'd feel comfortable about it. But if they aren't able to do that, if they just simply aren't able to find that guy who's better than what they have, they're still in pretty good shape. They're like 26 games over 500, and it's June 16th.
Gordon, I'm glad you mentioned that because I've kind of laughed this entire season at the way, especially at the national level, we've all tended to overreact to whatever happens with this Yankees team. Early on in the season, the struggles with Giancarlo Stanton and some of this lineup not producing quite the way we wanted, and then get to that marker in April where you've got 4 guys with over 10 home runs, more than any team we'd seen before, and they just continue to kind of impress but still draw this. How big of a laugh did you get, though, at the idea, as we talk about rivals here this morning, a couple weeks ago, this idea that the Mets would potentially give up DeGrom or Syndergaard to the Yankees around the trade deadline, that those would be realistic options for this crew going forward?
Or that the Yankees would give up Gleyber Torres or Miguel Andujar, who are both right now in the conversation for Rookie of the Year this season. Tell me the last time a Rookie of the Year got traded in his rookie season when they're making no money and are under team control for forever. Yeah, I mean, the Mets last year would not trade Jay Bruce to the Yankees, but now they're going to trade maybe their best pitcher for the last maybe 15 years to the crosstown rivals when he's still under team control for another couple of seasons. It's been silly, but look, with the Mets playing up until recently the way they've been playing, there's not a lot of conversations that you can have about the Mets. Every night they go out, they don't score any runs, so it's kind of hard to have a conversation about the Mets for all the Met fans out there when they've been playing as poorly as they have. So I understand why the conversation popped up. But whether or not it's very realistic, it doesn't really seem like it would be very realistic that the Mets all of a sudden to say, you know what, let's help out those guys across town. They're good guys.
I have a feeling DeGrom might have been the one leaking those stories himself. He's just trying to get himself out any way, shape, or form.
Right. If he could just, you know what, he might just show up to the Yankees and see if anybody notices, right? I mean, it'd be like the Costanza thing where he quits the job and he just goes back to the job just to see if anybody knows. It would be the reverse of that and just see if it pops up on anybody's radar.
The reverse Costanza. The fabled move. Talking to Gordon Damer, ESPN New York on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Going to hear him coming up at the top of the hour right here on ESPN Radio in New York. All right, from everything going well and being able to operate, understanding you're going to be good right now, everything's great, to well-being the Knicks at this point. Knicks got the number 9 pick in the draft on Thursday. We know Frank Ntilikina was the top pick last year. Different regime. A lot of things have changed since then. What are the Knicks looking for on Thursday?
I don't know if it's just because there's so much uncertainty in this draft or the fact that the Knicks have the 9th pick and, there's so many things that could make twists and turns. It doesn't really feel like, and it's unusual for Knicks fans, that there's really a consensus of who they want. You hear some fans talk about Kevin Knox. You hear people talk about one of the Bridges, but there really hasn't been a consensus from Knicks fans just yet. And it's really kind of hard to get a read on this regime right now. They've played things very close to the vest, and generally in the past, it seems like things have been telegraphed so easily by the past regimes that you kind of knew what was going to kind of happen before the draft. This year, it seems kind of different, and it's a nice difference. Anytime when the Knicks can be different than they have been, it's something you have to celebrate. So maybe this time is the time where they maybe trade up. There's been some talk of that. Maybe they stand pat at number 9 and just take best player available. But there really hasn't been a real feel, and it's strange with the draft coming up so quickly, of what the Knicks are definitely going to do.
Yeah, and it's how at this point do you build around Kristaps Porzingis, and we know with David Fizdale, I think there's got to be some renewed confidence around this team for the first time, a guy that players around the league really seem to embrace, a guy that would actually make New York a draw or at least get people. I hear Stephen A. Smith say it all the time. David Fizdale's going to get the meeting because he has that level of respect.
Yeah, and look, Knicks fans generally are the most delusional sports fans in New York. I mean, they still think that they're going to get LeBron James. So there's not a real level of, they know that this team is headed in the right direction, although they might believe that. But whether or not this regime is able to turn things around this coming season, it seems like the Knicks, no matter what they do with draft, free agency, they're going to be bad next year with Porzingis being out. It's just whether or not they can improve on the margin some.
Great stuff, as always. Gordon Damer, you can hear him on ESPN New York on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line with us. Going to be taking over at the top of the hour. Gordon, I like this, man. A fresh voice in the morning. We're enjoying this. We don't have enough time right now, but we're going to have to get into your golf is not a sport take on another day, all right? We're going to explore this.
Thanks, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you. That was Gordon Damer from ESPN New York joining us in the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Man, so that's what it's like to get to host a show with somebody else. Man, what a time. 4 to 6 a.m. right here on ESPN Radio. Check him out at the top hour here in New York. But coming up next, guys, for everyone else, it's 5 o'clock. You're sticking around with us. You know what happens around this time of day. Not only is there football, but there's football. And we got people mad about football next. It's First and Last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Now, First and Last. First and Last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Are you gonna stay
It's First and Last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Callers join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. That's 888-729-3776, 888-SAY-ESPN. Tweet the show on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at mGolic Jr. 57. It is that kind of morning, by the way, the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed, because we got pressing questions to ask you guys. about rivalry because it came up yesterday, and I didn't realize how deep this went until yesterday. I was minding my own business, getting done my portion of Golic and Wingo. We take you up till them every Monday through Friday, but we're talking about the World Cup a lot lately. We're in the midst of the World Cup, the midst of Major League Baseball season, all that stuff, and with the World Cup, it's a lot like your fantasy football team right now because without the United States playing in it, we're looking for teams to root for. We're looking for reasons why. Over on Golic and Wingo, we did our snake draft. We've each got a bunch of teams. Kind of a mixed bag yesterday result-wise for us that we'll get to, but I was interested because Taylor Twellman and a lot of our guys covering soccer here at the Worldwide Leader, their time to shine. Taylor Twellman comes over yesterday when I leave on Golic and Wingo and proceeds to let Landon Donovan have it. Landon Donovan, who yesterday tweeted out a picture supporting the Mexican national team as part of an advertisement with Wells Fargo, getting some money to root for a rival. And I knew that Mexico was a rival for the U.S. I struggled to remember that it was clearly the most bitter, but when you listen to Taylor Twellman talk about it, as we will in a second, it reminded me that this kind of stuff runs deep. And this kind of stuff has consequences, even in the name of a payday. Not everyone's going to be understanding of that. So, as we've done around here, 5 o'clock, means something, but 5 o'clock right now, during this time of year, means something a little bit different. And so, we bring you our special edition of Football at 5.
It's 5 o'clock. Do you know where your football is?
Sacre bleu! It's 5 o'clock. Do you know where your football is? Oui, oui.
Shout out to our... I don't even know what Jerry's title is. I'm going to call him the Director of Creativity here in every morning show on ESPN Radio for having the wherewithal to go 5 o'clock. Is it 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yeah, 5 o'clock. That's a level of attention to detail that we can respect around here. And respect is what's on the line. Respect is what's on the line because Landon Donovan is out here and he's got a lot of his teammates, and that's always the interesting part is what you do when you know people are watching. And Landon Donovan had to know his teammates were going to see this, and the payday had to be good enough for him to say, I'm all right with it. And Taylor Twellman, our ESPN soccer analyst, former U.S. men's national team member, clearly not.
It's healthy to be rivals. It's no problem with it. Everyone has their own price tag, apparently.
Whoa.
But I'm going to finish it with this, because a former teammate of ours, Carlos Bocanegra, tweeted Landon Donovan. Landon went from 0 to 100 about building bridges, not barriers, about Mexican Americans and whatnot. And yet this is the same guy that questioned German Americans and whether or not they were passionate enough to wear the red, white, and blue. I'm confused. All I'm saying is I'm not going to root for Mexico. That's the same team that tried to literally kick our rear ends in World Cup qualifying. That's the same team that the players tried to break my leg playing. Why do I have to root for them? It's healthy.
I wish I could have asked Taylor Twellman the question that we're asking you on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at mGolicJr57. How much would it take for you to publicly root for a rival, or to at least publicly endorse a rival in the way that Landon Donovan had to? Is there a number that exists for Taylor Twellman where he would have endorsed Mexico? Is there a number that would exist for me to support the Michigan Wolverines as a Notre Dame fan? Is there a number that would exist for you? Because I don't know. I don't begrudge guys for taking paydays for much. I struggle if there's a number that could really get me to wear maize and blue, knowing that the people I care about in my life, the big Notre Dame fans that I have around me, how they would react, because Landon Donovan was comfortable knowing that a lot of his former national teammates would have a major problem with this. A major problem with this. I see it as the lens of someone who doesn't care enough about this rivalry, who hasn't lived enough of this rivalry day to day to feel jilted in a way that draws a response. And even I'd like to think enough that I understand and care enough and know enough about the people in my life to say if someone was doing something like this in the name of a payday, that their heart's not really in it, but their wallet. And how can I begrudge someone for putting more food on the table for their family? Max Bretos, one of our ESPN SportsCenter anchors, joined Spain and Fitz yesterday and said this is less about the offense and more about the defense.
I think if
a company sponsor me and say, we'd pay you a good, healthy amount of money to put on a Mexico shirt, I'd be hard-pressed not to. My issue with that, with Landon, wasn't that. The issue was that another U.S. international, former U.S. international, decorated Carlos Bocanegra, kind of questioned that. And then Landon responded with, like, why don't you respect Mexicans? I mean, without them, we wouldn't be where we are as American soccer. I thought, you don't question someone for that. And he has since apologized. That left me the bad taste in my mouth. Doing that, pulling for Mexico, making some money, hey, you got to look out for number one.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio. We're presented by Progressive Insurance with more than 30 unique coverage options available. Progressive knows small business. Learn more at progressivecommercial.com. And he's absolutely right. You're not going to begrudge someone for making money. You're not going to begrudge someone for looking out for themselves and the best interest of their family and all these things that we've talked about. But to come and battle back, and this is the danger of living online in general. You saw it. We see it pop up all the time right now. We've seen it with burner accounts. We saw it happen with Brian Colangelo. This is to a much lesser extent because it's not going to cost Landon Donovan a job. But it's a reminder, when you go online for an express purpose, you better be willing to do that. We had Gordon Damer on from ESPN New York before. We talked about needs. He said, you don't need to go to Target. He was referencing his wife. You don't need to go to Target. You want to go to Target. That's not true. Sometimes you need to go to Target. But like anything else, you need to go with a plan. If I go to the grocery store hungry, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I'm going to end up buying 8 boxes of cereal and a pint of ice cream. But if I go to the grocery store with a full belly and a plan, I'm going to be much better able to go in there and control myself, control my emotions, and control how I respond in that environment. If Landon Donovan was going to come on here and advertise with Wells Fargo, that's all well and good, but understand what you're doing. You know some people are going to feel some type of way about it. You know you're making money off this. Send the tweet and walk away. Don't feel compelled to defend yourself, especially on that medium. If you want to do it long form, if someone wants to have you on a radio show where you've got time and room, great. Have at it. Be my guest. But right there, that ain't the way. All right, now a quick emergency press conference, a quick remix, if you will, of what we normally do around here.
It's 5 o'clock. Do you know where your football is?
We have more Tom Brady talking to Oprah. It's amazing. I'm continually amazed by what Oprah's able to draw out of people. And this is nothing new. This is nothing that we haven't heard before. There's the music. Now I feel at home. But Tom Brady. Man, Oprah caught him. You heard him catch right at the beginning here. Listen to the question and listen to the answer that Oprah asked Tom Brady on Super Soul Sunday.
Have you thought about what happens after football for you?
That's the wrong one. Here's the question.
Is there something going on with you and Belichick?
No, I love him. Mm-hmm. You know, I love that he's a incredible, coach, mentor for me. And he's pushed me in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And like everything, we don't agree on absolutely everything, but that's relationships.
I love him. If anyone's seen the movie This Is the End, that meter on the I love you is going to sound very, very familiar. And it just kind of gets at everything that we've thought about this situation all along, which is that this relationship is not perfect, but it's held together by the one thing. It's held together by the great sex of sports, and that is winning. Winning championships. Will overcome all else. Any other qualms about your relationship can be overcome with this. But it also begs the question, this whole conversation about Tom Brady, his admission that we're near the end of this. He's north of 40. He's a quarterback. This can't last forever. He's a family man. Someone's got a problem with that admission, though. Stephen A. Smith.
You gave the impression that you have every intention of being here for years and years to come. And that's something that he's been quoted as saying on a number of occasions. So I don't want to hear anything out of your mouth alluding to how the end is near. Now, granted, he's obviously closer to the end than he is to the beginning. He's 41 years old. We get all that. But the point is, I don't want to hear that out of your mouth. And it ain't even been a year yet that Jimmy Garoppolo is gone. But now that Jimmy Garoppolo is gone, for Tom Brady to do this now is clearly a shot at Bill Belichick. I mean, he basically gave him the middle finger. I mean, he really pulled the fast one. If I'm Bill Belichick, I'm looking at Mr. Kraft and I'm like, really? You see this? You see this right now?
I love Stephen A. Smith, but man, we have very different definitions of the word clearly. 888-729-3776, 888-SAY-ESPN. You want to get in touch? Or the 100flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at mGolic Jr. 57. Coming up next, I'll tell you the one fan that I can never identify with. And we'll hear about the health of one budding NBA superstar from that budding NBA superstar. All next here. It's First and Last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
That's why they call me Bad Company. I can't deny. Bad Company.
There is one fan, and it's a group of people. It's a type. It's not a specific person. It's not beholden to a specific team. But it lives in a specific area. First and Last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. I can't understand conference fan. Can't. Won't. In college sports specifically. So we're talking a lot this morning about Landon Donovan, him rooting for Mexico in the World Cup this year as part of an ad with Wells Fargo. Taylor Twellman, our ESPN soccer analyst, and a number of other former men's national team members ticked off by this. And we asked you, how much money would it take to root for a rival in a public setting like this? Landon Donovan had to tweet it. Big tweet, him holding up a scarf for the Mexican national team, saying the U.S. men's not in it this year. I'm rooting for Mexico. Bank with Wells Fargo. Because they paid me a lot of money to do this. Taylor called him a sellout. A lot of people could say that. A lot of people call him a sellout. And you can dispute the way he went about things after. And it's understandable. But for me, it's, all right, when you've got all of that in mind right now, and we can put that aside as his own separate discussion and one we'll have again in a little bit, but do you have a dollar amount on your fandom? Is this one of the places? Because I always said when it comes to advertising for certain things, you look for something that you find morally reprehensible where you draw the line. But with this, where it's just uncomfortable, where it's people understand you're not really a fan of this team, but there's money involved. So let's have it. And we asked you in the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at MGolic Jr. 57. And BEasy430 tweeted in something that reminded me that this kind of fan exists. He said, I'm a diehard Michigan fan, but when Michigan wasn't in the playoffs, I wanted to see the Big Ten perform well, even Ohio State. I root for Big Ten teams in bowl games and March Madness as well, all rivalries aside. Doesn't make me any less of a UM fan. Word? I don't understand conference fan. I do not understand conference fan for the life of me. I understand this might be unique to college football because we had this discussion earlier. Allie, our producer, is a New York Giants fan. Allie, our producer, had to watch the Patriots and the Eagles play in the Super Bowl this year. And yet when push came to shove, Allie, I guarantee that Eagles fandom was going to be a lot harder to buy off you than the Patriots fandom.
Oh, yeah. I was cheering for the Patriots.
Like you would never say, oh, well, you know what, the Giants are out of it this year, but I want to root for the NFC East.
Not a chance. Like, no, never, ever.
This seems unique to me in college sports because I don't feel like you do this in pro sports at all because that proximity is the one thing that creates college level rivalries in pro sports is your conference, your division, the people that you see most often. That's where most of the hatred tends to be. But in college, we do this all the time. You hear the fans chanting SEC, SEC. You hear these battles for conference supremacy. All these different things that lead to you eventually and inevitably cheering for a team that you would root against tooth and nail if they're going up against you. And that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me. Now, I recognize my bias in this as someone who is part of a team at Notre Dame that was an independent, that didn't subscribe to this college, this conference affiliation. I understand we're ACC affiliated now in the other sports and even a bit in football, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I can't acknowledge, I can't recognize that kind of fandom that just says, yeah, well, I'm willing to shirk one portion of my identity for the one that allows me a larger net to cast in order to have success. This is really, I guess this is what's at stake right here in this World Cup. There's a sentiment of this in what Landon Donovan's doing, which is my team's not in it. We weren't good enough to make it, so I'm going to support the next best thing. That's what's at the heart of this. Now, the difference is no one is paying you to support the other teams in your conference. I could understand it if all of a sudden someone's saying, yeah, I'm a Michigan fan, and X, Y, or Z bank group is going to pay me to root for Ohio State in the Final Four. Bet. Go for it. Wise man said, get it how you live. But for free? No. I can't get down with that. First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We're brought to you by GNC Auto Deliver and Save. Quality shipped, wellness delivered. And we got the NBA draft coming up on Thursday. Got a lot of top prospects in the NBA draft. We got a lot of question marks about a lot of bigs in this draft, by the way. We start with DeAndre Ayton at the top out of Arizona, the former Wildcat, the subject of a lot of NCAA and FBI probing, but a guy who seems like he's going to be a number one pick, Luka Doncic, the Slovenian athlete coming over, was a part of that Real Madrid team for so long, has been playing national basketball, has been playing professional basketball overseas, 19 years old, kind of the currency of the NBA right now, 6'8", forward, but great passing ability, a guy that can work well in transition, on and on down the list. Mo Bamba, all these guys, a lot of big bodies in this year's NBA draft, but a lot of question marks around certain guys, question marks around guys that we saw a lot of, and a lot of question about guys that we didn't see much at all. So Michael Porter Jr., is at Missouri, back injury, sidelined in most of last year. He joined the Will Cain show yesterday on ESPN Radio to basically clear up what he believes and what he says are a lot of misconceptions about what happened with his injury this year. Take a listen.
No, man, that situation got exaggerated a lot. So I just woke up normal, felt normal, went to the gym, warming up, and I just, like, my hip was just a little sore from the day before. You know, I've been working crazy hard the past 4 weeks, getting ready for pro day and all that, and it was just a little sore. So I told Mark, he told me to tell him if anything's bothering me, so I just told him my hip's a little sore. And he just wanted to shut it down for a couple of days, and then people took that and kind of ran with it, say, you know, my hip is injured, you know, I couldn't get out of bed, which none of that was really true. I was just sore, and I wanted to take a couple of days off, so that's all that was.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio. And it makes sense why you'd want to come out and get this out there. Michael Porter Jr., a guy who missed all last season. Michael Porter Jr., a guy who is still coveted by NBA scouts and who stands to make a lot of money. And a lot of money on the table right now. Guys going after it, too. I mean, you watch the current trend right now, the amount of young NBA stars, guys in this draft, DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley III, and Zaire Smith signing multi-year deals with Puma now because guys are trying to get in the money. I think it was Marvin Bagley that came out with a statement the other day. Yeah, Nike's great, Adidas is great. They are who they are, but this is about getting to the money. And now that we've got the news that Jay-Z becoming the official creative director for Puma, going to try and reignite the basketball brand for the shoe company, makes a little bit more sense. We're seeing across the board there is an understanding by these young athletes that there is a lot of money at stake here, and you have a chance to go out and take some of it early in this because the NBA contracts aren't going to allow you to. So you got to find other ways to it. And guys are doing that right now. This Puma thing is interesting. We'll put a note in that coming back as we transition back into a little more basketball. Also, take your calls, 888-729-3776 on the price of fandom. But coming up next for LeBron James, has all the LeBron drama been for nothing? It's first and last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. I don't know a lot, guys. I don't know a lot. Especially about this LeBron James offseason. I can't tell you what's going to happen with any degree of real certainty, but I can tell you this with certainty. And I believe it was Brian Windhorst or one of our NBA analysts say this, that it's going to take the full extent of this offseason period. LeBron James is going to play the long game with this decision, and I know exactly why. We'll get to that in a second, but first I want to hear from angry fans. We're talking all morning. What's your price tag to root for your rival like Landon Donovan did for the World Cup? Rooting for Mexico since the United States is not in here. We go to Lamar in Ohio. Lamar, you're on first and last with Mike Golic Jr. What is your dollar amount?
I don't have a dollar amount. I'm a diehard Michigan fan, and there's no way I'm rooting for Ohio State. I'm with you when it comes to this conference play. I don't care about conference play, especially Ohio State. I'm rooting for two teams, Michigan and whoever beats Ohio State, and that is it. Thank you for taking my call.
Hey, we appreciate the call. That is what I'm talking about. That is fandom to me. That is what it's supposed to sound like. I don't understand the conference fan. I am open to hearing from someone who might try and sell me on why. Let's see if Dan in Minnesota can do that. Dan, do you have a dollar amount in this, and do you have any reason why I should buy into the idea of conference fandom? Oh, Dan is gone. Dan's point, and another point that I've seen get thrown around out here has to do with the bolstering of your resume. Mike Schultz tweets in, I'm a Gonzaga Bulldogs fan, but I root for the WCC, their conference, because the more they win, the stronger my team looks to the country and the higher seed we can get. I'm not asking you to not use strategy. We all root for the teams on our schedule to do well so that our team gets propped up. But I'm saying your team is out of it. We're saying this is the exact scenario we've got with Landon Donovan here, where the U.S. men's national team is not in the World Cup this year, and you're asked, all right, like the rest of us who are coming into this as general fans, who am I going to root for to pass the time? Landon Donovan chose Mexico, the U.S. men's national team's biggest rival. He chose it because he was getting a payday. But for the conference fans in college sports specifically, because I don't think this happens in pro sports, for the conference fans who all of a sudden, if your team's out of it, if Michigan is out of the college football playoff run and Ohio State makes it, and you're saying, who am I going to root for? You root for Ohio State because there's a Big Ten team and you want to see them do well? I can't relate. Can't relate. 888-729-3776. 30 for 30 podcast return. Subscribe to 30 for 30 podcast right now in the listen tab of the ESPN app or on Apple Podcasts. Brought to you by Delta, where it's our goal to connect your life in the air to your life on the ground. First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So this NBA offseason, dominated by LeBron James headlines, and there's still a lot of uncertainty. We've turned through so many headlines already that Brian Windhorst, our ESPN NBA insider, went on SportsCenter yesterday and brought it all the way back home.
He wants to stay in Cleveland. He's looking for a reason to stay in Cleveland. But the trouble is, when we get to July 6th or July 8th, when he's about to make that decision, what will have the Boston Celtics done by then? What will have the 76ers done by then? What will the Lakers have done by then? And how will that compare to the Cavs and what they're able to do? After 4 years at the top, they're going to have a lot fewer options than those other teams. And that's the real issue LeBron is looking at.
Time and room. Time and room is what LeBron's looking for because time is starting to get shorter. We've talked a lot about Tom Brady sitting on the couch with Oprah and acknowledging that his career is coming to an end. But for him and LeBron James, we haven't seen that drop off in skill set, but you know it's coming. We joke all the time that Father Time's undefeated. These two have beat back the clock in a way that few other professionals and few other stars have been able to do. And especially at this level, MVP caliber level, year after year for these guys. But time is still not on their side. And so you need time and you need room, and it's something the Cavaliers don't have right now. It's just a lot of room. We're going to talk at length, and we're going to work out deals, ways they can move guys like Kevin Love and other big contracts to try and just bring something new in for LeBron James. You're going to cut off your arm and try and attach a bionic one for around the same price right now instead of rebuilding a whole new body. That's what teams like Los Angeles that keep popping up in this, that are the betting favorites to land LeBron, offer, is the room to build something completely new that has those new and untold possibilities, that has fewer limits. We think and we pretty much know what Cleveland can be at this point. Now, adding a marquee piece, if you're able to carve out enough of your own body to bring Kawhi Leonard in somehow, that's great. But my point in all this is we can debate the rest of that. We cannot debate that this decision will take as much time as possible. And that affects one group specifically, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And there's a big reason why. Dan Gilbert. They've got the draft coming up. They've got some decisions to make strategically about what they're going to do in the draft. Brian Windhorst points that out as well.
They have to decide between team building, refreshing this roster, getting some youth, growing some young players, and they've got to decide between LeBron building, which would maybe be to trade the 8th pick, maybe see what the market is for Kevin Love, to get older players who may not be able to help you in 2 or 3 years. You know how this is so difficult? They put themselves here. Yeah. Because when they decided last summer to trade Kyrie Irving for a draft pick, it became apparent that this was ultimately going to lead to this type of decision. And so they're also in the dark. LeBron is not going to talk to them and tell them which he prefers. They're going to have to operate independently of LeBron. This is going to be a very interesting draft night for the Cavs and their future.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And that's just it. When they made that decision to move Kyrie Irving, something that didn't benefit LeBron at all, that was made independent of LeBron James. Dan Gilbert, forgetting that move to make a change with David Griffin at GM, to make a change top to bottom, to slight LeBron James on the way out he did before. And now to look at this situation, to look at this timeline in the offseason and the way it's going to play out, LeBron James is going to do this team and this organization no favors when it comes to telegraphing his decision, because of Dan bleeping Gilbert. We saw that cold, lifeless handshake as they celebrated another trip to the NBA Finals, rummaging through the Eastern Conference yet again. We saw what that looked like because those feelings don't go away. They won't go away. And hell, if we're all honest about the way we would feel, we can say it's business all we want, but sports is always deeply personal in these spots. And when you've got the leverage to hurt someone who slighted you, we usually take advantage of it. We're usually not above that. Maybe he should be. Maybe LeBron James should look at Cleveland and a place that means so much to him and want to set them up for success in the future. But he's also a competitor. He could be potentially going up against this Cavs team if he leaves. There's a lot to weigh in on this, but the one thing we know for sure is that this decision is going to take as long as LeBron James wants, and it is going to do no favors to the team that he might potentially be leaving, and specifically the owner that's involved in question here. Now, that's because most of this is taking place behind closed doors. That's because LeBron James' motivations are still unknown to us. And those are up for debate right now in an interesting way as well. Charles Barkley been uniquely vocal on this one. The NBA on TNT crew has been outspoken about this. We heard from Shaq the other day. This was Charles on LeBron's legacy and why he should actually stay.
If he goes to the Lakers or Celtics or somewhere else, he'll be a mercenary. He won't be a Cleveland legend. Like that, winning that one championship was worth two, in my opinion, when he was there. So I hope he stays in Cleveland. I do. I hope he stays in Cleveland. The guy's an amazing person. He's an amazing player, but he doesn't need another ring to justify his greatness. His legacy is secure already.
It's really interesting because when we talk about legacy conversations, one of the reasons that ring chasing has become so popular is because that's the metric that we hold dearest, and because we have all these legacy-based conversations. And I remember hearing Chuck on the NBA on TNT said after the finals saying, don't ever bring this LeBron James-Michael Jordan comparison to me again. But LeBron said he's chasing ghosts. That's what he wants. So you can't on one side say his legacy is secure and on the other side try and put a cap on it. These guys are competitors. LeBron James is a competitor. LeBron James in this wants to win and wants to continue to try. Maybe it's further his legacy. Maybe it's simpler than that. Heard an interesting point from Will Cain, the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio, saying maybe we've overthought this entire thing.
The idea that winning a championship is only valuable insofar that it wins your legacy, that it's an individual achievement that writes to your book, the thing Shaquille was talking about. I don't think that's why most guys pursue championships. I don't think that's why late-stage LeBron James, I don't think that should be his primary motivation. When you go out to play and you go out to win because that's why you're here.
The only thing I'll say in defense of that is that's the micro. When you go out onto the court, of course your sole motivation is to win. Sports are too hard. As much as we simplify anything, the day in and day out of the game is too complicated, and you're asked to do too much. You put too much time into it to want to do anything less than go out there and dominate your opponent. But when you get to think right now in the offseason the way LeBron James is about what's going on, we've heard him speak on his legacy before. He's done that in real time. He's done that in real time during the playoffs in a way that's rare for athletes. It's rare that we afford athletes that luxury, but it's rare that we get LeBron Jameses. And those guys, a guy who, again, openly admitted to chasing only ghosts at this point. You don't do that if you're not concerned about your legacy. So yeah, you can want to win on a micro scale, but on that macro level, LeBron James has absolutely given us every indication that these rings and the way that he operates his career right now is built on making sure and ensuring a greater legacy for himself and his name. 888-729-3776. The price for your fandom on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Coming up next, going to try and figure out where the line is for me. What it would take to wear maize and blue. It's next. It's First and Last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. It's First and Last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We take you up to Golic and Wingo every Monday through Friday. They're there 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Stacked guest list for you today. Lon Kruger, the Oklahoma head coach, going to join the guys at 7:30, getting you ready for the NBA draft as well as Tom Penn, our ESPN NBA front office insider, going to help kind of set the stage for all of this, continue to look forward towards NBA free agency. All of these things that are going to kind of all start to come to a head. We've talked about the Cavaliers and their plans for draft night, how that's affected by LeBron James in this offseason. This is the part where all of these things start to meld because you've got to simultaneously think about your future down the road as you invest in young stars and the here and now and trying to land the Paul Georges, Kawhi Leonards, and LeBron Jameses of the world. Colin Montgomery, the World Golf Hall of Famer, going to join. I have imagined as we have more fallout from Phil Mickelson Gate. And everything that's gone on there. Will Phil's legacy ever be the same in golf? Gasp. And Bruce Arena, the former U.S. men's national team head coach, going to join at 9:30. Topic of the day has been Landon Donovan and his fandom. So for Bruce Arena, how does he respond to a guy that was part of that brotherhood going outside of it for a payday, rooting for Mexico, the Mexican national team, the U.S.'s most bitter rival in this world stage? And also, how does he assess the state of U.S. soccer right now? We got a World Cup coming up on our home turf in 2026. How does he think we go about getting a team ready for that? All that coming up on Golic and Wingo this morning. We have been asking, and I'm genuinely interested in the answer to this because we've talked so much about Landon Donovan and his fandom for sale. I asked about fandom for sale, and it got me sidetracked on something that always just sort of baffles me, and it's this caping for conference fandom in college football. And so I wanted to ask on the 1-800 or the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, 888-729-3776, Matt in Georgia. Matt, why are you rooting for your conference here on ESPN Radio?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I think, first of all, we're talking Landon Donovan. He's came off the bench to play, so I think he's just looking for a little, really to be relevant again. But then taking a step back, you need to point the poll at people who have graduated from said universities. And when you take and look at second, third order effects, you're looking at more money for the conference and then strength of schedule. So for everything, when we're talking playoffs, when they base it all off of strength of schedule, you're looking at the teams in the SEC. The better the teams play, the better the strength of schedule, the more money the school makes at the end of the day, which then brings more athletes in, better facilities, et cetera.
I understand, and we appreciate the call. I understand the idea of wanting your conference to appear robust. That perception is important. But as we get into this conversation a little bit further, I'll explain why there's still a portion of this that makes very little sense to me. We're going to wrap it all up for you here right now.
Now, first and last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
Y'all didn't know you'd get the remix today. What do we got, Allie?
Do you think LeBron could recruit Kawhi to Cleveland?
Listen, if there's anyone that's well acquainted with less than desirable geographic locations, it's Kawhi Leonard. I love the Riverwalk in San Antonio, but we wouldn't exactly call it a metropolis. No, I don't think so. I think it would take too much to get him there, and I think at this point, Kawhi Leonard, it is a homecoming. I know we don't talk about a lot of his origin story, but Kawhi from out in that area in Los Angeles, I think it's either going to be those guys would stay put in either or spot. I would still think if all things could be equal, there's a better chance of Kawhi somehow mending fences and LeBron ending up in San Antonio than Kawhi ended up in Cleveland.
Will the Capitals regret not paying Barry Trotz?
Yeah, Barry Trotz, the Capitals head coach, their Stanley Cup winner, a guy who led them to 2 President's trophies and a Stanley Cup in his 4-year stint, and the best record in hockey. Now on the outside looking in, now looking for a new home. Gary Wyshynski, our ESPN reporter, talks about why.
Well, we all knew that Barry Trotz didn't have a contract for next season. What we didn't know is that his current contract had a clause that if the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, there was a 2-year extension that kicked in. Problem being is he signed that contract back in 2014. That's before Mike Babcock made a bunch of money with the Leafs, before Joel Quenneville made a bunch of money with the Blackhawks. It only paid him $300,000 more than his current salary. So Trotz sat down with GM Brian McClellan to get a new deal. He wanted about 5 years, said McClellan just before, and the Capitals didn't want to meet that price. So Barry Trotz resigns after bringing a cup to Washington.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. This, to me, is a mistake but also an indication of just how valuable one cup was going to be to this team. You heard Barry Trotz talk about at the parade, yeah, we want to go out here and defend our Stanley Cup. That becomes a lot harder when you carve out a piece that was a part of the reason why you were so successful. Now, I understand it's never going to be as important as the guys in the ice, but still, that matters. But this is an indication that that one cup was so valuable that they were willing to come up short on the dollar amount needed to keep a quality head coach around in this league that had been reset by that market. To me, that'll probably end up being a mistake, but that's if your standard is trying to stack Stanley Cups now, as opposed to just saying, all right, we got the monkey off our back, we're good now for the time being.
Astros have a 12-game win streak, over under the streak ending at 20.
Kept it going dramatic fashion last night, the walk-off double to win the game. I'm going to say under on this. There's just too much randomness in baseball. Now, I understand they play the Rays, the Royals 3 times, the Blue Jays 3 times, and the Rays twice again. So there is room for improvement to this streak here. And the Astros, you're the defending World Series champs for a reason. Baseball's just too damn random for me. Take the under.
Can you believe that Juan Soto did the impossible? He time traveled.
Somewhere Ronda Rousey weeps this morning, wondering how someone figured it out. She thought she had it pinned down. No time travel possible. Juan Soto, because this game was played in continuation, he hits what would have been his first career major league home run. The young Nationals prospect got called up and has been great since he got started here in the bigs. But a continuation of a game that happened before he got called up means that that home run is now pre-call up and not on his official record book for Major League Baseball. Remarkable bit of tomfoolery. Apparently Barry Bonds did this too, as our own Tim Kirkchin pointed out, so he's got some elite company.
How much money would it take to put a Michigan t-shirt on?
This is going to have to be in the thousands. To put it on, let alone, would have to be
put it on
in the thousands. To actually do what Landon Donovan did and go out and advertise for it with it on in a way that says, come root for Michigan, we're talking a six-figure sum here.
How much money would it take to change your Twitter profile to a Michigan logo?
Depends for how long. That one could probably be less. I'd probably do that for in the low thousands.
How much money would it take to get rid of all your Notre Dame gear?
Not happening. Sorry, guys. I took too long. There's too much actual blood, sweat, and tears soaked into the issued gear that I brought back from school. You ain't never getting that out of me. Never.
Private plane money?
All right, maybe private plane money. Flying commercial. Ugh. Anyway, we'll go see if we can raid Golic and Wingo's closet over there, what it would take for them to fork it over. It's first and last here on ESPN Radio.